Hey, I didn't see you there. Hi, it's tabletop time. I'm just busy getting rid of the last Murray. Why don't you give me 5 minutes or so and we'll get right down to the video. Today's painting journey is going to be a fun one. I am diving into a very cool collaboration with a whole bunch of amazing creations. It is Monster Mash, originally started by a lovely YouTuber, Trent, from the channel Miscast. We are taking part in Monster Bash 3, and to start off, we need to randomly generate a bunch of creature bits from cards that all the creators drew and put into a generator. So let's launch into a bit of that, shall we?
Okay, everyone start your engines. Okay. 3, 2, 1, pause. Stop or drop.
Oh, nice. No!
Oh god.
Oh my god.
Oh no.
You get beat right
It's like
off the bat.
Okay, are we ready for the
Whatever
second
this little guy
card?
is.
Draw.
I'm trying to stop it.
I like this one.
All right, 3, 2, 1, draw.
Oh,
Oh,
nice.
thank goodness. Cat ball.
We should
Okay,
make Quentin
3, 2,
Tarantino.
1, draw.
Ah, yeah. That's sick.
Okay, 3, 2, 1, draw.
Candle.
Oh no.
You
Also
got
a candle.
star hands. 3, 2, 1, draw.
Oh, no. Very nice.
What's that?
Oh, I'm just
Whatever
gonna
it
have a
is,
hand
yeah.
of foot monster.
Is
Ready?
this the last one?
Yep.
3, 2, 1, go.
Whoa.
Big
So
old
I just
GTI.
have limbs.
Do.
I have a limb monster.
Now with those cards, I had some inspiration. I wanted to make something mad, crazy, and a little bit silly from the god of change himself, Tzeentch, from the worlds of Warhammer. And to do that, I will be using all the cards, realized in as literal way as I possibly can.
I am very strongly compelled towards this box of dinosaurs.
With 7 cards in Monster Bash, I tried to find at least a few of them in this dinosaur kit. My read on a lot of these cards was to build something that was semi-literal. I wanted to come fairly close in visual representation and theme to each of the cards I pulled. So in this blue dinosaur, I saw, first and foremost, the chicken legs. The feet on this dinosaur were the most chicken-like. I would need to exaggerate the upper leg feathers to give it that big bird appearance that the card has, but I'd be tackling that with some putty later. Now, unfortunately, many plastic dinosaurs were harmed in the creation of this monstrosity. I had an immediate vision for that big gnashing mouth, and that was to put it at the center of the dinosaur's belly. This meant I needed to carve the mouth into the center of the body so I could recess the insides of the mouth and give it some space for a dangly tongue to hang out. From an early stage, I knew that I would want to have on this mouth a whole bunch of little hands. I was making a Lord of Change, so it needed to look 2 things. 1, extremely weird, and 2, like it was consumed of a god of magic. So to twist conceptions of the gnashing maw and change it to be something that's consuming knowledge, I had this vision of having all the little dinosaur arms feeding books into this maw and digesting it into facts. This is the fun thing about the lore of Warhammer 40k and Tzeentch in particular. Demons in that world do not have to follow what we would consider the laws of reason. So the concept of a monster that literally eats forbidden knowledge and digests it into answers and information is something that can exist in the Warhammer universe, and that's pretty fun. So to get these small arms, I held down the first of the dinosaurs. I applied an anesthetic to it, but unfortunately it didn't seem to keep it from screaming. Shh, 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 shh. No tears, only dreams. I would also need to cut the dinosaur's primary arms off just to repose them. I needed to create a pose that was a little bit more elaborate, a little bit more wizardly, because of course this demon is a sophisticated, intelligent creature and is not a simple beastie dinosaur with its raw claws as it currently was in the sculpt. I was inspired by a creator, Will McDaniel, whose videos I'd been watching a lot through the Monster Bash process, and it had drawn me to making the teeth using the recipe he makes on his channel, which is using thermoplastic beads to press into shape some fairly gnarly and realistic looking human teeth. Now this process involves shaping the teeth and then when they dry, putting a little bit of a tea stain on them. In this case I used Seraphim Sepia. It was a little bit stronger than ideal, so later on I'd go back and paint a little bit of white over the highlighted areas. I moved on to conceptualizing how I was going to make the dragonfly wings. Now I had a wire mesh that I decided to use for the frame. While it wasn't exact to how how a dragonfly's wing structure would be, and honestly what would be, at least it gave the effect of that insect wing, while also providing enough structure for me to place something on top of. Have you heard of the very cool products from Redgrass Games? That's right, the sponsor to our video this week is Redgrass Games, and I wanted to show you all their very cool painting handles. We've mentioned these on the channel before, and we absolutely love them. Ever since I started using them, I haven't stopped. For airbrushing especially, which is something I'm super new to, using your thumb to rotate the model while you spray it is just fantastic. Beyond that, Redgrass Games have a range of other hobby tools, from hobby cutters to a range of paint brushes. But what they are probably most well known for is the everlasting wet palette. And their new wet palette 2.0 is available for pre-order on their web store now. Now, amongst other amazing feature upgrades, they also boast reusable paper, which means that your extra value is being extended even further, to get even more life out of your wet palette. A new designed resealable lid will ensure that your paints stay moist for the whole duration that you're painting your model. And in my opinion, they are the best wet palettes on the market. I have 2 at home, and we've got about 3 or 4 at the studio. We pretty much don't do anything without them. Now, Redgrass Games collaborated with us and made some very cool tabletop time metal magnetic plates for their painting handles. So if you enter the code TTT-RGG, you'll be able to secure 2 of those metal plates at checkout with your order. So if you're interested in trying out something new, leveling up your painting, and grabbing some awesome tools from a really cool company, check out Redgrass Games, go to their store, and maybe grab some of those tabletop time metal plates. All right, let's get back to bashing together a monstrosity. With hacking and chopping done, it was time to get down to converting. The absolute first step to do was to fill the cavernous belly with some milliput to bulk out the hollow dinosaur model and create a space for the inner mouth. As well as this, I got green stuff out for the first time and started by extending the dinosaur's toes to become more wicked, elongated talons. With that done, I sculpted some soft recessed lines in the top of the tummy palette. I built up the milliput quite heavily to give the impression of gums, and then pressed in my set teeth. Later, I would take them out to fully paint all of this and paint the teeth, but at this stage, I was simply making the impressions to ensure that the milliput would set around where the teeth would be later. With both sides of the jaw eventually completed and all the teeth fit into place, I repurposed the dinosaur arms I'd previously liberated from their owners. These arms would be placed around the maw and would be funneling in more books for it to eat. Using superglue to affix them to the model, I used more milliput to sculpt and blend the gaps, seamlessly making them part of the creature. One of the areas I needed to match a bit more to the card was around the upper legs. These chicken legs had quite an accentuated fluffy bit of chicken feather with some naked legs poking out the bottom. To do that on my dinosaur, I wrapped a huge wad of milliput around the upper half of the legs and used a forked tool to roughly give the approximation of feathers as a texture to the upper legs. This bulks it out and makes it look like it's wearing hilarious chicken pants, and I for one am here for it. And one of the cards I hadn't addressed up to this point is the eye. So at the top of the dinosaur's neck, I had removed the head and sculpted a little bit of a plinth, I guess, for a giant eyeball to be placed on. I made this eyeball by rolling together a big ball of that thermoplastic, and unfortunately didn't put it on camera. Once placed, I used milliput to create a gnarly optic nerve that was coming out of the back of it and going down onto the neck. Now in this step, I also cut out 4 wire pins and glued them up to the back of the eye, creating a bit of a strange framing mechanism. I'll tell you a little bit more about what that's for in a minute. But first, I had to go back and work on those wings. I'd been trying to work out a solution to how I was going to get the dragonfly wing effect for a while, especially the transparency. I thought of some things such as UV resin, but I didn't think it would fit the wild nature of the mesh as it sat on the model. However, I was in a group call with other members of Monster Bash, and one of the members, Zambies, suggested that I use craft paper, or tissue paper as we might call it in Australia, to glue down on top of the wire mesh using PVA. This would not only adhere to the shape of the mesh, but also, when dried, be relatively transparent. Knowing that I was going to be applying transparency over the top, I airbrushed on some color shift paints to give an insectile appearance to the frame of each wing. Once it dried, there was a final step to put some linseed oil on the cloth to try and push the opacity down a little bit further. Unfortunately, the PVA had effectively sealed the tissue paper, so a lot of the oil didn't soak in areas, leaving quite a mottled, transparent look, which is kind of cool in its own way. If you have a solution to getting that transparency back, I'd love to hear it in the comments below. This kind of effect without using resins or chemicals would be a really interesting thing for me to explore. With the wings tackled, it was time to get back to the bulk of the project. There were a few little bitsy things I needed to do, and I got them underway immediately. Sculpting the pages of a book roughly out of milliput, and then covering those books with some cardboard to create the tomes that my beast would be eating. I had also secretly ran away and 3D printed a Thousand Suns style staff with blade, which I test fit and positioned in the creature's left hand. This would further lend to the Tzeentch monster nature and try and pull it away from just a random abstract beast. Now the print had failed, unfortunately, and the bottom half of the staff had fallen away, but I was happy to fix it with some plasticard rod and an old piece from a Chaos Space Marine kit, which I glued on as the bottom piece of the staff. Now remember I talked about those pins up at the eyes? Well, it's about time you find out what they're for. So this creature, well, it's meant to see all knowledge, and you can't see your knowledge when you're blinking. So, by virtue of its creation, its top eyelid has been viciously pinned and flexed up so it can never blink. To make these eyelids stretched out on the poles, it was super important for me to get really smooth green stuff. So I carefully rolled it out between 2 sheets of grease-proof paper until it was completely smooth, and then delicately placed it over the back of the frame, pressing it on only on the edges and gently, and then allowing it to fully dry before blending it in a little bit better with some more green stuff and milliput. For a while, I thought about having the lower eyelid peeled down as sort of a Jacobean ruff all feathered out beneath his neck, but I decided to sculpt a weary and wrinkled looking lower eyelid to kind of lend context to the headdress. For the finishing touches of the model, I sculpted some thin extra veins out of green stuff and ran them along the optic nerve cable. I also sculpted these delightful Tim Burton-esque hands. These were completely inspired by the card that I had drawn, but I decided to take it the extra step and make the fingers that were jointless actually curl up. I imagine them unraveling like a party streamer. Gnarly. As a further step to make this creature look like a true disciple of Tzeentch, I created some religious vestments for it. This scarf I draped over the shoulder, I sculpted in a whole bunch of chaotic looking, maybe Cthulhian-esque symbols. Lots of sharp dashes and dots and brutal forms. I made sure to include a chaos star and a couple of sigils of Tzeentch though along the length of it. This was then draped over the shoulders of the beast to lend it a more wizardly air. Finally, I went back to the eye for one completely unnecessary detail. I wanted this creature to want to look at things so hard that even when its eye was focused elsewhere, it could just burst a fresh eye forth. So I created some miniature eyes pressing out from the eyeball itself. And finally, it was time to move on to painting. But before I could do that, I had to remove the teeth. Now, warning, if you're creeped out by dental stuff, I used pliers and did it one by one. All right, this is just a little mid-roll interlude thing. Hopefully I'm out of shot there. If you have been enjoying the video, please like and subscribe. It was time to begin painting the model, and I knew I was going to come at this organic creature with an approach of airbrushed gradients. I chose a palette of near human flesh tones and set to work painting the mouth and also the underbelly of the creature. I was using a gory red undertone with an elfic flesh over the top. Once I'd done the softer areas of flesh on this creature, I moved to the leather. The tougher hide I painted with undertones of purple and then highlighted up to a blue. When concentrating on the more, I made sure to put a lot of deeper reds towards the back of the throat and around the inside where the soft palate would be, while also spraying gory red into each of the tooth sockets. For the feathers, I chose a Birds of Paradise green, moving up to an orange in the center. Orange, green, and purple all go together really nicely, so I love using these tones on more out there models. Once the airbrushing was done, it was time to move on to detail painting and picking out some of the spots I couldn't get to with the brush. Dry brushing the leather and feathers was was a fairly easy process, just using Vallejo's magic blue. I found it interesting how much awesome texture was on this little children's dinosaur toy. It would be a fun experiment to just repaint one of these children's toys, because the dry brush caught on so much texture and detail that really made this stand out and look really good. I painted the thick blood vessels on the ocular nerve coming out the back of this eye in a gory red. And once that was done, I came in and started painting the eyeball itself. I used slightly pinkish mixes of white to create a gradient from where the ocular nerve attaches to the front of the eye, making sure to reduce the amount of red in the white mix as I got towards the front. This is meant to be replicating the huge amount of blood saturation and blood vessels towards the back of the eye. In between the layers of white drying, I painted the iris and pupil. I painted the pupil of the eye in black 3.0 in an attempt to make it as dark and light consuming as possible. And then I used purple hexed lichen around the outside to create the iris. I knew the iris would need to be very detailed, so I went back to my wet palette and mixed increasing blends between a really bright blue and the purple color, as well as a completely contrasting color in a bright orange. By feathering these colors out and creating lined patterns stretching from the pupil to the edge of the iris, I think I did a fairly decent job of replicating a human eye, or the appearance of such. As a finishing touch to the iris, I made sure to put a darker mix of black and hex lichen right around the outer rim. And then I used a fine detail brush to spiderweb out huge number of little capillary vessels in red across the eye, giving it a bloodshot appearance. To get the extremely fine blood vessels, I splayed out the tip of a brush and then dabbed on red paint, almost like feathering it on or stippling sideways. Now forgive me, this is going to get a little bit gross, but I had to mix up a technical paint of my own by mixing some whites, grays, and a shiny gloss varnish. I call this eye goo medium, and I dabbed this around several parts of the eye where it had lacerations in it. Once this was done, I used a small amount of blood technical effects around the sore areas of the eye, then put a nice bit of Vallejo's vomit in the area where tear ducts would have been had the eye been human. Once this was done, I set about painting the frame or the headdress for the eye, which I used some old black gold from scale 75. I love this gold, and I find myself returning to it often. Did a quick highlight in shining gold, and then accentuated the pierced areas of skin with some of that blood technical effect. Now, the hand card I'd been dealt was very Tim Burton, and it actually had a black and white stripe pattern on it. So I decided at this stage, this character was wacky enough that I'd just go for it. So I painted the hands with white stripes. But as usual for me, I used a grey paint instead of this so I could highlight up to a white later. And while I thought this would clash and look terrible, at the end of the day I'm actually kind of happy with it. It looks weird and eccentric, but it kind of fits this model. The 3D printed staff blade, I painted a gold and blue pattern in, reminiscent of the Thousand Suns, as a bit of an homage to them. And I painted out the rest of the staff with metallics. Once this was done, it was time to return this gentleman's teeth to his maw. So I put a little bit of detail paint, getting some white paint quite watered down, and painting it in gentle strokes along the side of each tooth. I didn't want to cover up all of the tea-stained sepia that I'd put on the teeth, but just highlight a little bit, make them look closer to pearly whites. Resetting these teeth in the beast was a gruesome endeavor. Unfortunately, he hasn't been brushing lately, and his gum care isn't too good. So as I pressed each of the teeth in, I found a little bit of blood was spurting out. Gnarly. With his dental care plan fully realized, I moved on to giving these teeth the luster that they deserved by putting a gloss varnish on all of the wet areas of the mouth, especially the teeth and tongue. While this was drying, I went back to the metallic areas where the wash had dried on the model and dry brushed on some of that shining gold. Painted the shawl around his shoulders, just using Vallejo's khaki paint and highlighting it up with a little mix of white in the khaki. I used a sepia wash in the recesses to give it the depth that it needed. The model had a headdress that used to be a staff from the Chaos Space Marine sprue, which I had repurposed to decorate his eye. Painted that up to match the rest of his color scheme, as well as painting the pages and books on the small books that I would be gluing into his mouth. And with those pieces done, I could finally lean back and appreciate my horrible creation.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us here for Monster Bash 3. Today is a day we have all been waiting for and cramming for, and it's time to show each other our monsters. I think we're all dying to see Bill making stuff present his monster.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's lovely. So these are my cards here. This lovely assorted collection. And from this, I have made this guy down here.
Oh, that looks so
It's
good.
very big.
It wouldn't be like me to do things before absolute last minute, so mine is still half constructed. So this is my little dude.
The mouth is in the middle.
He's got funny
I love
chicken
that.
legs. and he's a toy dinosaur. He's gonna have a big juicy eyeball on the top. But yeah, he's falling apart as we speak. But in a week, he'll be structurally sound. What a journey that was! We have finished a monster and I really hope that you like it. I love it. It is goofy and creepy and disturbing and doesn't follow the rules, just like Tzeentch would love it. Consuming knowledge with its voracious maw and gazing out into the universe, ever in search of more. As always, I would like to thank our Patreons for helping create this video. But today I have a special thank you, and that's to all the other creators that have taken part in Monster Bash. Now, stick around and check out all their videos. You have a Halloween day full of cool, creepy horrors and joyful creations. There is a playlist with every video being put together, so I'd encourage you to check out everyone else's videos and join in the fun that we had. The random generator is up online, so check out Miscast's website to find that, and you can join in and create your own monstrosities. Tweet us using the hashtag MonsterBash3. We'd love to see your cool creations. And a final thank you to our sponsor, Redgrass Games. Your wet palette really saved the day with me doing those details on this paint job. So I wish you all a happy Halloween, and I wish even more that Australians celebrated it as much as Americans do. It's such a cool holiday. It's probably my favorite. Till next time, everyone, have a great week. We'll see you soon for some exciting new projects. Yeah!